Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special session on climate technology. I'm very glad we have such a great audience with the business leaders and leaders in academia, in government. And this is a little surprising. Right after lunch, I hope our discussion can keep everyone awake. And climate technology is all technology that have to do with addressing climate changes. And in climate change, we have three areas: regulation, we have market, and we have technology. For regulation part, 2015, the world reached the Paris Agreement, and it is in the process of implementation, and it also has been going quite slow in many ways, and we're hoping that process will go smoothly. On market, as we know, China last year, just announced the countrywide, nationwide carbon market. I will discuss about this probably a little bit later. And so far we have not really seen significant progress in many carbon markets worldwide, and whether or not that is optimistic, we're not quite sure yet. But a lot of people nowadays just really looking at the technology, because the technology so far has brought in probably the biggest progress in addressing climate change. We have seen clean energy development in many areas. The cost for clean energy has been consistently lower than making the solar power, wind power, for example, to be competitive against many other traditional, conventional ways based on coal-fired power plant anyway. And with us today, the leaders, all of them, all four of them, the business leaders, and every one of them, they're leading their company and in innovation and meeting the challenges that we face today. I would like to first invite Katie, then just give us quickly, what you think the greatest challenges and the greatest opportunities that technology can bring us for addressing these climate change issues.
Sure.
All right.
Okay. Thank you. So just for quick context, for about 5 years, up until earlier this year, I led a clean energy and climate team at Apple. Did a lot of work here in China, investing in utility scale, solar and wind, and working with our manufacturing partners to transition to renewable energy. I now live and work in Nairobi, Kenya, and invest in off-grid energy applications and climate technologies there. Very different, so I hope I can sort of help speak to very different markets today. But your question of greatest opportunities and greatest challenges, I think the greatest opportunities today are to scale up proven technologies that are commercially viable as fast as possible. What you described of how renewable energy technologies and storage have come down the cost curve. Electrified transport has come down the cost curve. The affordable sensors and the computing power to actually use IoT technologies for efficiency in energy and other natural resources.
Let's do this, Katie, if I may, to interrupt a little bit. You worked for Apple for 5 years, in the last 5 years. Well, now, if you ask you to put your money on, what kind of technology you would put?
Where would I invest capital in different technologies? Interesting. Well, first is the just clear business viability of a lot of existing renewable energy technologies. In many, context specific, but you have grid parity in many markets for solar and wind. I think electrifying transport is hugely important, and it's what should be invested in. I guess, are you saying as an investor, if I put my investment hat on? Right. I think that the answer to that question gets to some of the challenges that I think is holding us back. Because at the end of the day, I don't think it is technology limitations that are holding us back. I think it's some of the structural pieces around climate technologies, not having the right long-term policies in place, not having the right structured finance, because a lot of climate technologies are high upfront CapEx, low marginal CapEx, whether that's solar and wind, electric vehicles, energy efficiency work. And so, we need some of the right pieces in place in order for climate technologies to scale up as fast as they need to. Because as an investor, to be honest, it's hard to get attractive returns out of climate technologies without policies that level the playing field economically for those.
Okay, I will get back to you on that.
Yeah.
See, what kind of policy would it need to incentivize investors to put their money on the climate technologies. Let me just move to Dimitri. As a member of the managing board, Royal DSM, I know your responsibility has a lot to do with the innovation, but also you have been leading many programs within the company. And I do understand that your company is now ranking very high on the Dow Jones, the sustainability index. Just tell us, Katie didn't mention any technology that your company is doing. Just let us know what kind of technology within that company that you think is the most viable and for the climate change challenges.
Okay. Right? And then you will put your money into that.
Then I will put my money in there, right.
And I will try to do my best.
There we go.
I would like to mention 3 categories which are important, and I come with a specific example where you can put your money on. We believe that addressing climate change cannot be done in splendid isolation. You need to do that with suppliers, you need to do that yourself, and you need to do that with consumers, customers, down the value chain. And interesting, Katie worked for Apple. We just recently signed an agreement with Apple on renewable energy, where we've agreed we will go to 100% renewable energy as a whole, as a company, as a supplier to Apple. I think that's a part in the value chain. The second part is we ourselves have committed to reduce greenhouse gas reduction. So I think it needs to be suppliers, it needs to be to improve our own footprint, but also work with customers. Let me give you an example of one of the technologies we apply, which is linked to customers, and it has to do with thinking circular. Because addressing climate change is about changing the mindset from linear thinking. You use raw materials, you produce something, you sell it, and then it's landfill or end of life. We would like to re-examine that end of life concept into circular. For instance, in the US, we have invested quite some money in using waste of corn stoves to make biofuels, second generation biofuels. So not the food or the corn itself, but the waste of it, which otherwise would be deleted. And we make biofuels out of that. So circular thinking helps addressing climate change.
Circular thinking is important. The biofuel, we all know it is very important. What about that question that Katie just raised? In terms of the cost benefit, it is an area that I should put my money in there right now?
Well, the interesting is that you need to start with innovation with trust. And you will definitely see barriers along the way.
How long should I trust you?
A long time,
right.
But also a short time. The interesting is we have measured what we call Eco Plus. Those are innovations which add to a better alternative to the world. Better in terms of footprint, better in terms of efficiency. And we have seen that these technologies and these products grow faster and have a very good result. So people sometimes think it's either you're sustainable or you're profitable. That's a wrong dimension. You can do both, but it needs some time to do that.
All right, we'll come back to that. Then now I move to Chopin from BP. We all know BP stands for British Petroleum, but not everyone knows. Now you have a new name, the Beyond Petroleum. And just tell us, what does that mean, Beyond Petroleum, and what you do to address these concerns sometimes from people about petroleum?
Thank you for that good question. BP, yes, we are oil gas company and used to be only oil gas, but the world faces a dual challenge. On one hand, we are expecting 9.2 billion people by 2040, and the energy demand growth is still very high. And we are talking about 25% growth in the next 20-some years again. So for that reason, we have to provide clean, affordable energy to people. On the other hand, we have also challenging of reducing emissions. So for BP, we have decided and launched the new strategies. First one is to produce more gas. For example, last year, out of 7 projects, 6 of them were gas projects. And this year, 6 projects, again, big project, 4 of them is gas. And that's the number one. And we're going to generate more gas in our mix. Right now, it's 50 gas, 50% of oil. And then secondly,
So by doing that,
it's cleaner.
Lighter, cleaner
exactly.
in terms of carbon emission.
Yes, but that's not enough. We every year we invest now about $500 million in advancing low carbon solutions, as well as identify new innovations. For example, in US, our wind power already provides enough power that is enough for 400,000 households in US. In Brazil, we use sugarcane for biofuels, and the bagasse, the waste from the biofuel, we use that to generate biomass for the power. And in the United States, we just acquired a company called Lightsource and participate in certain percentage. This is the biggest solar power developer in Europe. So we are trying to build our solar power presence worldwide, has already established lots of projects. And in addition to solar power, biorenewables, we have lots of other innovations projects and
so
trying
those
to
are, I guess that have a lot to do with your investment. What about the technology front? What is your best technology, your silver bullet for, I should put my money in?
There's lots of them, by the way.
Okay.
And the first one, we actually invest in a company called Solidia. Solidia is a company that actually can help the cement industry to curing the carbon dioxide. And I just been told from my managing director responsible for the venturing business.
Tell some of us, myself and in the audience, who do not know much about that technology. How does that work?
7% of the carbon dioxide emission right now is from cement industry.
Okay.
So in that process, you have carbon dioxide emitted. And the Solidia, they have innovated a good technology, have a curing process to prevent, capture the carbon dioxide. So that's really a very exciting project we are investing. And another one is called Fulcrum. We also invest that company, along with Kathy and other partners, that is using waste to generate the biojet fuel for aviation. Now, we all have heard about light vehicles to use EV, but what about for jet fuel? So this company has identified a good technology that can convert eventually the jet fuel using biojet, because 7% of carbon dioxide in the world now is emitted from aviation fuel. So this is another technology we are really excited about. And among lots of other things, we are also looking at advanced mobility area.
The jet fuel, if I may, Xiaoping, the jet fuel area, kerosene, how much of that you're doing from the biofuel technology right now?
We're investing in this technology. We hope to bring that technology to different countries and make that available.
How soon you think the cost for that kind of technology can go down to be competitive compared to this oil-based?
I think sometimes when we are looking at all the innovation talents from the worldwide, from a solar, from wind, from a bio, seems like cost of all this new technology been decreasing very fast when we all invest and help cultivate and help to scale up. I think with the new investment, I'm sure.
Let's hope that learning curve will go down quickly. And we'll
the
get
big
to that
companies
point.
like BP, we just help to invest in this company, help to scale up, and then hopefully we can make the technology more cost effective.
Sounds good. Thank you. Jay, you're from a place where it's also home to another major oil companies, right? I think was it Chevron over there. But your work is the Internet of Things, and we have heard so much about Internet of Things. But give us some concrete examples how this kind of technology can actually help us to reduce carbon emission to address climate threat.
Before I go down with specific answer to that question,
Right.
I'll address the opportunity space first a little bit. I think today's era of technology, information technology, is unbelievable. The velocity of change in terms of compute, storage, and networking technologies as they're evolving is huge. So information processing, contextualizing this information, analyzing it, creating insights, all of that can lead to good proof of value for all of these solutions that are being talked about. So information processing, information technology is the area where we are deploying a lot of solutions for like thousands of customers. But in terms of IoT specifically, if you look at it, what does IoT enable? It lets you sense and detect and acquire a lot of information in real time, close to real time. Getting all that information, storing it, processing it, contextualizing it, correlating it, creating analytics and insights out of it, doing service lifecycle management, that end-to-end use cases are big in energy efficiency. I think most of our people who have very expensive assets, very difficult to operate, very costly to operate, they look for operational efficiency, and one aspect of it is pure energy efficiency. So 10, 20, 30, sometimes the adage goes, what you measure is what you can manage. So once you start measuring, you have boatloads of information that you get, and you can suddenly get the right dial to optimize. So it's an experimentation process, right? The answers are not known ahead of time. You go do an analytics workbench, try out a few examples, and then you start optimizing. So that value realization, what we have seen with customers is around energy efficiency. That's one vector. Utilities are doing a good job in water management. We were talking earlier about non-revenue water from source to consumption, how much gets wasted, right? Just simple sensors to detect active and passive ones to detect leakage, saves a lot of natural resources. So areas of saving water, improving from production, distribution, and consumption of energy, various opportunities exist. And depends on which dial you want to optimize. We can do that.
Jay, I buy this argument about measurement. Measurement is so important for addressing this energy efficiency issue. But at the same time, some argue this is for efficiency problem. You also have a rebound effect, right? Your refrigerator used to be very low efficiency in the past, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Now you have a much higher efficiency refrigerator, but you get a much bigger refrigerator in your home. So how do we address that problem with this IoT?
I think from an IoT standpoint, the downside, as I talked about the opportunity space, I'll reflect on the downside. One is there's a ton of noise, ton of data that you acquire and you don't do much with it. So getting a very systems view, a holistic view, not optimizing one subsystem here or another subsystem there, but doing it holistically, getting a systems engineering view of things which kind of up-levels you to a more macro view of the world, right? Macro view of at a home level. You're not optimizing the refrigerator or the kitchen consumption of power, for example, in the refrigerator case. You're looking at it holistically at the home level, at the community level, at the distribution network level. So at the various levels in which the systems can be designed, you have to start measuring and managing it.
Then what kind of Internet of Things technology are you using at home?
Multiple. I think the sensor technologies are dime a dozen today. In fact, my biggest concern with the volume of sensors and data acquisition systems that have come up is about the e-waste that we are generating. I think I churn out more waste at my own home with the number of switches that I have to replace every year because they're not connecting to the new network, for example. The point is, simplistically, the architecture of an IoT solution can be broken into three pieces. The edge tier, which is where all the sensors, the data acquisition systems are all there. You have the platform tier. So there's a lot of progress in the cloud-based ecosystem today. Right. You look at what AWS is doing, what Google is doing, what Microsoft Azure is doing. All of these cloud technologies have suddenly made the platform tier very interesting and very cost-effective and energy-effective as well. Then you have the analytics, insights, and all this enterprise tier. I think in this architecture, you have to have an end-to-end view, a more holistic view. Technology is not the issue, as Katie pointed out, even Dimitri mentioned. Right? There's tons of technology available. It's how do you construct a nice system of systems, a holistic view, model it, look at the use cases, drive for outcomes, drive for business value, and then, proof of value, test it out, try it out. One insight may be worth a ton, I'm sure, and then 250 others may not be worth realizing any value. Then you drop them, you go. It's still a very agile way of working.
So we need not just a single individual technology, but really we need a system. In terms of system, we also need a better governance system. Katie, you raised a very important question. In order for technology to be utilized in the real world, we really need the help from the public policy front. And here in China, there has been a lot of government support for solar technology, for wind technology. But last May 31st, the government decided to remove all the subsidies for solar power generation, and it generated a lot of complaints, of course. Then what kind of public policy you would like to see to support? Where do you find the shortage of supply of a good public policy for support, for supporting this kind of technological innovation and application, of course?
I guess first off, I think there's a lot we can learn from what China has done really well in the last 5+ years around renewable energy incentives and policies, and some lessons learned of things to do better. So a big piece of what public policy has to do is create long-term consistency and a view of where we're going. The US has struggled because we have enacted short-term renewable energy incentives that creates a real sort of boom and bust cycle around, say, wind power development. China has been good at creating long-term consistent policies and leveling the playing field. You have to either acknowledge that fossil fuel generation is being subsidized directly or indirectly, and if you're not going to remove those advantages, you have to create equalizing advantages for renewables. At the same time, I recognize and appreciate how difficult that is, because there is the criticism that the renewable energy incentives in China were too rich at times, which doesn't foster the greatest efficiency for the technology. And this is where I think creating policies around climate technology is so difficult, and I have great respect for the people who have to work on this, to walk that fine line between bringing these technologies down the cost curve and sort of up to scale, while not creating the wrong incentives. So for example, here in China, you have I think 2.5 times as much solar and wind capacity than in the US, which is incredible, and most of it has been in the last few years. But only 40% more generation from wind and solar, which is saying that wind and solar in China is operating at a much lower efficiency, much less productive assets. And why is that? And there are a number of reasons. So how do you make sure you're getting the scale while you're also getting the performance from the climate technology?
This has less to do with technological innovation, though. Here you have a large-scale curtailment problem, right?
That's part of it.
You built the wind power station, but you're really not really generating the power. Right.
And that gets to actually a technology that wouldn't necessarily be thought of as climate technology, but is smart grids. I mean, if you really want to decarbonize energy systems, you need incredibly agile and intelligent grids that move power, high voltage lines that move power across using IoT technology that can immediately respond to what's happening in the grid. That's the only way you can really get to the 65% renewable grids we say we need in order to sort of meet the Paris Climate Accord.
With the existing technology right now we have developed in China, US, Europe, and so on and so forth. And now I know you have been working in Africa.
Yeah.
And huge continent, huge opportunities over there. If you are going to bring these technologies to Africa to address this climate resilience problem,
Yeah.
climate mitigation problem, what kind of technology we should look at
Sure.
to bring these technologies to them?
So first off, I should say, I'm based in Kenya, and one cool statistic is last year, 77% of Kenya's power generation was renewable, mostly hydro and geothermal. So, and I think there are a lot of examples of that in different parts of the continent. So we have the opportunity to keep countries like Kenya on a low carbon path, while we need to very quickly respond to the sort of inequality and lack of access that people have. A couple things that I see across sub-Saharan Africa, 600 million people don't have access to modern electricity. And that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. And a lot of analysis shows that 200 to 300 million of that 600 should be reached through grid extension. That's the most cost-effective way. But another 300 to 400 are best reached through decentralized energy systems. And I think one of the most interesting, but still economically challenging, is our mini grids. And I think that's where we may see the greatest adoption of mini grid technology, solar plus storage, at rapid scale with the right policy incentives.
Very helpful. Thank you. I want to shift gear a little bit, Dimitri. I know your company, particularly your president CEO, played a very important role in carbon financing worldwide. And Europe, of course, has been leading in carbon market. And according to the theory that the carbon market can promote technological innovation and application. So looking at your own company, what do you see the EU ETS system, this emission trading system, actually helping your company meeting that goal?
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's the key question, and thank you for that. And that's also why I think government should play an important role.
Exactly.
To your question to Katie, and I would like to re-emphasize that. It is producers like us, it is consumers like all of us, and I think we as consumers can push it even further to buy products which are climate friendly, but certainly also governments in a carbon price. Because the issue is, today we live in a world where the economic system is the mainstream. And it means that if you make profit, you do well. We as a company think that is an old system thinking. You need to think about people, planet, profit. You need to think about a holistic view on what you deliver to the world. And we feel that waste should have a price. And I'll come back to that on carbon. Today, 9% of what we produce is circular, so it's being reused. In other words, 91% is either landfilled, incinerated, or leaked somewhere in this world. That is unacceptable and has to change. And therefore, there needs to be a system change on how we think about our economic value. So carbon price is a small step to that. And carbon price started in several countries, and very happy to see after the COP21, there's a sort of a mutual agreement that this is the way forward. And the interesting is that we started it in Europe with a carbon price where about 1,300 companies, about 88 countries, covering about 20% of all carbon emissions is covered today by a carbon price. It started also in Europe with a price around €6, so $6. And today, it is above 20. And if it's above 20 and it's creeping into the 40, 50 region, it will have an impact on economic thinking.
Sure.
Because then basically you don't assume waste to be zero or a carbon emission to be zero. It has a price. And that will also favor innovation. climate-friendly technologies. And I think we need end. So we need push from the government, we need push from the consumers,
Give us
and
an
we need a carbon
example.
price.
Give us an example, how that carbon pricing, based on the carbon market system, particularly the EU ETS, actually made your business decision
Yep.
Adjusted for technological innovation in DSM.
Yeah. Maybe two things. One on the strategy, it impacts quite a bit what we do at DSM, and also on the product. So let me start with the strategy. DSM is an old company, exists 117 years. We reinvent ourselves based on what we see in the market. Our recently launched strategy in June is called Purpose-Led, Performance-Driven, around 3 business domains: nutrition and health, resources and circularity, and climate and energy. So oral innovation is around these 3 circles. That leads to innovation in certain fields of climate and energy. I'll give you an example. The ones we currently are working on is improving the solar efficiency. We're talking about data, big data intelligence. The interesting is, if you capture 1.5 hours of sun a day throughout the year, it's enough for a year's energy. The problem is that the efficiency of solar panels is not good enough. So we develop coatings to improve the uptake and the reception of sun on solar cells. If there will be a carbon price of 50 to 100 euros a ton, then it's not only economically viable, it's one of the best products we ever developed. So even without a carbon price, it helps, but the transition, even without the subsidies on solar panels, it will help with the carbon price. So you're not only depending on subsidizing the solar energy.
You're helping your customers, but do you get return? You get the adequate return from that practice. All right.
The interesting on solar panels is because you innovate, you can also install new business models. So we're also working on business models where we basically improve the efficiency of our customers. We will give them the coating for free, and then we earn the money back on the higher efficiency. So we have an agreement with the customer and say, hey, you don't believe on the higher efficiency? We'll apply the coating, and we share our efficiency improvement 50-50. A fantastic model.
Great. Xiaoping, I'm going to ask the same question to you. 2 very different type of companies, right? As a oil and gas company started in Europe, and how do you feel, your company feel, this pressure from the carbon market, particularly that EU ETS we're talking about? How much of that the pressure is actually pushing the company, BP, towards innovation?
I would say actually BP has been advocate for carbon price for years. So it's not the pressure, it's our own initiative as well. And we think corporation, I agree with Dimitri, government, consumer, producer, all of us have a responsibility to make sure we actually continuously reduce the carbon footprint. So in BP, we have actually energized the entire workforce, all the business, 70,000 people or more, to use a RIC framework. RIC stands for Reduce, Improve, Create, RIC. So we want to reduce our footprint. For example, we're committed to reduce 3.5 million tons carbon dioxide emission by 2025. And we commit to grow our business, but don't increase the net carbon dioxide emission by 2025 based on 2015. And we lead the industry to say we want to meet methane intensity to less than 0.2%, for example. We want to do that because it's our strategy to have advanced solutions. Improve, for example, the PTA technology. PTA is a key raw material for our fiber fabrics, etc. Our technology we improved in such a way the carbon dioxide emission is 65% lower than other technology, as example. And we improve our, for example, the emission from the fuel, transportation fuel. I mentioned a little bit more before about the biofuel, etc. And we also use biosynthetic lubricants, for example, and working on the additives to ensure we can improve that as well.
Let me just further ask this question. According to the Paris Agreement, the world is going to decarbonize the economy by the middle of this century. Just look at it. It's not too far from. I know many of us sitting here will see the end of a fossil fuel age. And how would a company like yours to adjust to this new target set, by the world and for the world, right?
Yeah, I think if we can grow business without growing carbon dioxide, identify all the solutions, that's a really good thing.
Do you have a strategy to phase out?
Yes.
And how does that work?
Yeah.
So beyond petroleum, right?
Yeah. Right. And let me give you an example. If I just may talk about the PTA, we not only created good PTA technology and processes, we also created product called PT Air, where we help consumers to use our product in a carbon neutral footprint by creating some other kind of carbon credits. For example, we just announced the investment with the Iliang, a forestry company in China. We will increase the forest footprint so that we can reduce the carbon footprint. Once you make your commitment, says, well, I want to grow business, but without increasing net carbon dioxide, there's lots of ideas and innovations coming.
But that's more of on the sideline, into a corporate social responsibility area, rather than a mainstream business strategy, though.
Well, main business strategy, I mentioned about switching to more gas as one example.
Okay.
And looking at our methane emission, for example, how the fugitive emission can be reducing our operations, and 3.5 million tons of carbon dioxide reduction, net reduction by 2025. All these are the commitments that you have to identify in lots of areas. Energy efficiency, Jay was talking about, we are looking at all the options for modernizing our operations as well as digitalizing so that we can be efficient. And lots of things need to be taken place.
But natural gas, that's still, well, first of all, it's still part of the fossil fuel, and it's considered to be a bridge fuel. And that's still, will have to be phased out at some point, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's why, I mentioned about us investing $500 million a year in looking at renewable energy, wind, solar, biofuel, biopower, biojet, and all these holistic solutions.
We move toward bio.
To renewable.
Beyond petroleum, beyond gas, we go toward bio. Pretty soon, I'm going to invite everyone from the audience for their comments and the questions. Katie, you have a question.
I was just, on the natural gas topic, this is a really tricky one if we're talking about kind of a low carbon future, because it is lower carbon by many measures. It is a cleaner fuel than other fossil fuels. But you build a natural gas plant and you've locked that power capacity in for decades. So to this question of what are the technologies we should be investing in now, I think there's an important debate and a healthy tension around natural gas helps us get on a lower carbon pathway, and that's very positive, especially for countries that don't have sufficient energy capacity today. But it's hard to call it a bridge fuel if it ends up being a few decades. The bridge is a few decades long, right?
It's
and
a
we don't
bridge.
have that kind of time. So, so it's an important debate.
Thank you, Katie. But I still want to come to Jay. The theme for this annual meeting this year is about the fourth industrial revolution and also innovative society and economy. And speaking of measurement, you just mentioned, and measurement technology for, say, carbon dioxide concentration, greenhouse gas, the concentration in the atmosphere, the measurement. Just tell us how this IoT technology actually helped to advance the measurement, to capture the big picture, where we are. We know we are much higher than 400 ppm part per million by volume in the atmosphere. This is compared to 280 pre-industrial level. And but we want to get accurate measurement of this everywhere in the world. Help us and even down to maybe to business level and also to the household level measurement. What can we get from this advancement in technology? Right?
So just to answer your question, the sensor technologies themselves have gotten way advanced, right? In terms of the margin of error, the sensitivity levels, calibration of those sensor technologies has reached a point where you can get good data points. Now, how does information flow and whose sensors provide these information points? That is another big challenge. Today, we talked about gaps. Opportunities are there, but the gaps are that information flow across the world at different places, different organizations, data flow, information flow is still very constrained. Access and transparency is still very constrained. You don't have visibility on a timely, so that you can do interventions on a timely basis. You don't have access to that kind of infrastructure. So while there is a significant hype around the IoT space, where there's a lot of point of proof of value, proof of concepts, scale deployments happening, it is still not at a level of maturity where the volumes are significant that we have a global footprint which gives us accurate, seamless pieces of information. So the center actually, that is one of our motivations in joining the C4IR in San Francisco. The idea is that whatever reference solutions we build, whatever implementation guides we put together, that can be globally diffused. Everybody in every part of the world gets it. I'm very happy to see the China Center getting open today. Japan is done, India is done. So across the world, I think the governance aspect, the policy aspects of deploying these technologies needs to become more seamless. I think we still have significant gaps there. I did want to talk to one point that you had mentioned about efficiency of the wind farms.
Yeah.
Despite high levels of implementation volume, the efficiencies are lower.
Yeah.
So in fact, we did a lot of work around how these windmills actually operate and how you can optimize. If you squeeze out 5, 7, 10% per windmill, but now you look at a larger construct of a larger system of larger collection of windmills, right? How they operate together as one farm.
Yeah.
How they operate across. So the system of systems principle, right? Applying those and leveraging them to optimize at a much higher level. There's still ways to go. I think while I'm all excited about the technology aspect, saying compute, storage, network technologies are amazingly good now. It continues to go down this price performance value chain. Increase performance, lower price, but we still have a lot of ways to go.
Great. I would like to invite the first round of questions and comments from our audience. And for those of you, please identify yourself first and put it in a very straightforward way. Please.
Hi there, my name's Dr. Fiona Beck from the Australian National University. I'm one of the young scientist community. I'm interested in what the panel thinks about the possibility of a hydrogen economy for decarbonisation. There have been several national from Japan and Australia and international reports about the unique possibilities right now about the emergence of a hydrogen economy.
Thank you very much. The prospect of a hydrogen technology. Let me just collect a few more questions before we move on. Right, gentleman over there, please.
Hi, my name is Jake Okechukwu Afodu. I'm a global shaper with the Abuja Hub. I'm just going to make reference to the gospel about the Paris Agreement, trying to decarbonize the world by the mid of the century. It's not something many African states would say amen to because it doesn't really make a business case for them. And the options are quite limited because in terms of producing these technologies that are green technologies, we don't really have the resource to produce them. So I wanted to ask if you thought about technology transfer and how you think that might work, because with the fourth industrial revolution, these technologies are just incrementally changing and advancing, and we just can't catch up, and we can't make money from these technologies. We don't produce them. What do you think is the solution? I know Kenya is a good success case, but Nigeria is quite different because, I'm sure you know the peculiarities about my country. But what do you think would be the solution for these states who actually want to do something about climate change, but none of these things are working for us?
That question is for you, Katie, because he was looking at you.
Sure.
Yes, gentleman over there, please.
I'm Vineet Mittal from India. We had set up first large grid-connected solar system in India way back in 2010. when we got the tariff of 32 US cents per kilowatt hour. And yesterday, we won a 500 megawatt project at 3.5 cents.
Wow.
And we are not losing money. And there is no government incentive. So what China and Germany have done over last 8 years is to innovate and bring down, because of the scalability and advancement in technology. The cost has come down drastically. And if private sector cooperate, like say Apple or Google, they start buying energy directly from players like us in Africa and India. And government doesn't get bullied by the thermal power producers because now we are cheaper than them. So in India, the thermal power is close to 9 to 10 cents. And on the exchange yesterday, it was sold for 30 cents. So if thermal powers are becoming less competitive despite all the subsidies, whereas solar and winds are becoming more competitive in India and in Africa also in 3 countries, we are doing projects at almost 40% of their conventional power cost with the storage. So it is becoming, it's becoming more competitive, more reliable, and you can take out the unreliability part with the batteries and innovation.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll probably leave that question to the 2 gentlemen over here. I have the last question for the first round, please. Right.
Hello, I'm Marjolein Helder, one of the tech pioneers of the World Economic Forum. We produce electricity with living plants as a new sustainable energy source. So listening to the discussion and like framing it in the 4th Industrial Revolution, I'm missing a bit of courage. So you're telling like we're investing $500 million every year into renewables. That's less than 1.5% of your total profit. Sorry to say, but so I'm sort of, I would like to challenge all of you to come up with some like really bold ideas, like what are the really big things that we could do, like to turn this around. I hear you say, well, we should invest in scaling up like existing technologies, like stuff that has been proven. So what about the stuff that's coming? If we, for example, don't want to go through gas to renewables, but we want to skip gas and do like renewables at once, which would be obviously better for the environment. So what could we do? Can you come up with some really like challenging ideas, bold ideas that that will all of us make us happy?
Well, thank you very much. I think that's a terrific question. I want to our speakers to address that, and everyone in the audience who would like to take on that challenge. Please just go ahead. Let's just take care of the first round of questions. Katie, let's start from you over here. Right? You have particularly,
I'll take the question that I
Sure.
think was directed my way anyway. I think you raise a really good point, and this is one of the important sort of ethical discussions to be had around kind of the entire movement towards a low carbon economy when you have a number of emerging markets that haven't yet fully electrified their countries and have major energy scarcity issues. But I think to what the gentleman here, the solar developer in India, said, I think it's sometimes a false trade-off to say that these technologies are more expensive, because in Nigeria today, I believe that something like 2 to 4 gigawatts of diesel generators get installed every year. It's huge. And that's a very expensive cost of generation. So if that's your benchmark, there are tons of renewable technologies that are more compelling economically than fossil fuels. I think it's more of an execution challenge than a pure economic benchmarking challenge. But I do think you raise a really important point around getting more of the value-added services happening locally as opposed to just importing the technologies. To the extent that we can be doing more local manufacturing of this kind of equipment and creating sort of business opportunities locally, that's when it starts to really take off.
Thank you, Katie. For that hydrogen question, can I ask you, Xiaoping?
Yeah.
I mean, this is just not only beyond fossil fuel, it's beyond fuel itself, right? We're just moving into a very, very different area of energy.
Yeah.
Right?
So BP actually just published our new technology outlook, and we try to look at all the research papers, results, worked with academics as well as other research institutes, and we set together, do some kind of outlook. It's all about the views, isn't it? And that view is, we view the hydrogen fuel cell technology is going to be competitive by middle of the century. That's what we predict. Of course, it depends on lots of things, right? How much you put in, and what is the technology breakthrough and the government support, among other things. But we do view that could be a very sustainable, competitive technology in the mid-century. But if I may, I also like to answer that question about how can we take a bold move. I've been in this industry for over 20 years. And I really want to have a magic bullet. But the funny thing is, the more I know about it, the more I found it's so complex, so difficult. It's not just one magic bullet. It really needs to have everybody in BP, as well as everybody in the oil gas industry, to work together to come up with a solution in each aspect and process, consumers, producers. That's why our CEO, Bob Dudley, has called 10 oil gas companies together. He is the chairman of OGCI, Oil Gas Climate Initiatives. We want to work together to say what's the solution for the world, to meet the Paris Agreement, and to come up with a solution that can provide the heat, light, mobility to people who want to have good living, as well as the carbon dioxide issues. So it's a journey, and I'm glad we have made lots of progresses, but it's not one solution fits all. It's just very, very complex issues.
Well, we just hope that journey is not too long. Yes, please.
I want to build on the request on being a bit more bold. Because it hurts a little bit, right?
Sure.
I was asking, are we bold enough? Well, I think we are, but it's defensive. But I think it's fair. It's a fair challenge, and I think certainly here around the World Economic Forum, we should be challenging ourselves. And I was firstly thinking, what if we are not bold? Don't worry, because others outside our own establishment will be bold, right? So if we don't make it, fine.
Good point.
In some of the cases, I don't even think you should bank on the establishment, because they will work against new things because they have their own legacy assets, right?
Exactly.
I'm slightly more positive on what's happening over the last 5 years, because we get acceleration. And I will give you an area where DSM plays a role, and that's in electrical vehicles. We produce materials for electrical vehicles, and we work with customers which we didn't have 2 years ago. I mean, there are companies in China who didn't exist 2 years ago and have just launched a full electrical vehicle last week in March. So these companies are really bold. And I feel that we are bold to work together with these, but it's a bit indirect. But so I get your point. Let me think about it before becoming defensive, but it's a fair point. I think we all need to be bold, but I'm also with Xiaoping. I don't believe it will be one technology that will make it work. I think it will be multitude of technologies working against a better future. And the beauty is that after the COP21 agreement in Paris, we are on a highway with different technologies and different approaches with different speeds. But at least we're heading into the same direction.
Well, you just mentioned that word acceleration. Actually, that is a key feature for this industrial and technological revolution we are talking about. The good news is, if you look at the major economies, you can see accelerated transition from a high carbon energy to a lower carbon energy system for all major economies, including the United States included, the China, UK, Europe. All have accelerated in the last decade, which is a really good news. So Jay, would you like to address that question? Just mention, different countries have different stages. Then, you guys talking about this probably state-of-the-art technology, but still we need to look at the specific economic and the political social situation and when applying to this technology in a holistic way? Right?
From a capability standpoint, I think everybody around the world wants the very best of capabilities. So you can't dumb things down in terms of the value proposition. In terms of the cost, so I'm just talking about the grid, the smart grid example you used. Putting a small edge gateway that does analytics at the edge and figures out where to source the power from. It's a simple algorithm running in a simple software container, running in a little hardware at the edge, at the consumption endpoint, right? To just now creating one for US market, creating one for Europe market, for the Asian market, South American market, African market. So again, the pricing model, the cost involved in producing something like that to get consumed, we cannot compromise on some of the capabilities that, because people expect a good level of capability. It's about how do you build technology that is sustainable and globally deployable. So we have had significant challenges in that because a product or a solution built for the US market may not sustain in some other markets. But over time, what we have noticed in the last 2-3, that's the hope, is in the last 2-3 years, there's more democratization of technology ingredients, there's more availability, and price performance value has gotten much, much better. So it's reaching a point, at least in the last financial year that we had, where some of these solutions are very effective, and at best, you don't have to go through a massive proof of value return on investment justification process to adopt some of these technologies. But we still have challenges. I think the price of compute, storage, and network will continue to go in a good direction. So we will keep building these solutions with the center and kind of diffuse them globally. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, to be bold, let me just ask the audience here, especially those of you who have been working in this technology area, those of you have young, bright minds and some terrific ideas. Yeah, and I got this young, bright minds over here tell us how you take this challenge.
About being young, I'm not so sure, but I'm a physicist at CERN, and I want to give you an example of the difficulty of innovation.
CERN, tell us, stand for.
Sorry?
Yeah,
what is CERN?
Physics.
For people who don't know what CERN is.
CERN is the European Organization for Nuclear Research. That's the place where we discovered the Higgs particle a few years ago. Right. And it's the place also where we invented the World Wide Web, among other things, and many other things. What I want to say is that, to give you an example of how difficult it is to propose innovation if it doesn't have anything to do with wind or solar energies. At CERN, we have demonstrated technology that would allow to use thorium as a primary energy source and make thorium a sustainable source of energy. Now, nuclear industry, does not like it. So we, since government listen to nuclear industry, we don't get institutional funding. And then the private sector doesn't like to invest in something that might take 10 to 15 years before they make money. So how do you get out of this type of dilemma that it doesn't work either way, but we as physicists are convinced that this is certainly something that has to be studied. You know, the issue of fossil fuel is so serious that I think you cannot exclude one direction of research, especially when the basic technology has been already demonstrated.
Yeah, that's a very interesting comments. It's really hard to look at beyond wind and solar nowadays, talking about clean energy. And CERN, you have a lot of innovation going on over there. Just perhaps just tell us a little bit more that what are the challenges as a scientist, innovators, you face what would you like to see to facilitate your innovation?
Well, I can give you an example. For example, we have collaborators who have designed a special accelerator that would produce a high power beam in a very compact way and in a very cost-effective way compared to other things that are developed. For example, in China, there is one project also, accelerator-driven system, which uses a LINAC. We have developed a cyclotron that would make this thing cost effective. Now we submitted a proposal for funding to the European Union. And you can guess what happens. It's reviewed by at least one person from nuclear industry, and they just say, no, thanks, it's great, but no thanks. And it is the difficulty we are facing. So I hope you understand the difficulty, but this technology has been demonstrated. We've done experiments at CERN that have verified the basic concept of such systems, and then all the components exist. In Sweden today, some people are building the European neutron spallation source. It's a beam of 5 megawatt. With 5 megawatt beam, you can, with the system we propose, make unit of 100 to 200 megawatt electric power. For €1 billion of that order. I mean, this is a rough estimate because you have not done the industrialization, but I mean, these things are realistic. However, it doesn't seem to be happening because we don't get any help.
Thank you very much. I understand we don't have a lot of time left. Thank you very much for raising the hand. I probably just go real quickly around the table here. Now we're in the fourth industrial revolution in 20 seconds. How are you prepared for that?
I think I'll borrow the one-line statement, be bold. Be bold and test and try out. Don't hold back on innovation.
And Katie? You moved to Africa and waiting for preparing for the fourth revolution technology, right?
I mean, that's where I think there needs to be sort of an equitable distribution of where the investments are going for climate technologies and energy infrastructure.
Equity for everyone. Thank you very much. Inclusive. Right.
I'm a stubborn optimist, so I think we'll make it work. Remember, this room 10 years ago, there will be no smartphones.
Right.
Look how that changed the world. So I'm a stubborn optimist. I think within 10 years from now, we're here, we see a completely different world, a better world.
Thank you. And BP, how are you prepared?
I like the word of being bold as well.
Thank you.
And our CEO says we want to grow business, but without growing carbon dioxide emissions by 2025. That's very, very bold. And we are more energized by ever to put our thoughts, our efforts, everyone's efforts, to make sure we can face the challenge, providing the energy to people who need while reducing carbon dioxide emissions. Being bold.
Thank you very much. That concluded this round of a discussion. I want to thank all of you for your participation. Apologies to all of you who have a lot of questions and comments. And stay tuned. Come back next year. Thank you so much.